this past May, there was one open position. They're the ultimate authority in municipal decisions. They sign contracts, negotiate settlements, appoint department heads, and members of the various boards and commissions. They also serve as the town's licensing board, although town meeting may be taking that up to change that policy. And they are the police commissioners who are responsible for setting policy in that department. Next slide. The town administrator role, by contrast, is a full-time paid position. They're appointed by the select board to manage the day-to-day operations of the town. The town administrator recommends to the select board the hiring of department heads and is responsible for putting together the financial plan. So think of the town budget each fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. Let's see. So the Town Administrator Act, which is what this is about, details in just 2 pages the roles and responsibilities of the town administrator. In addition to the town administrator, there's also the deputy and assistant town administrators who help prepare the financial plan, oversee development and production of the warrant, and the combined reports and other documents that town meeting needs to have. They are resources to both the select board and the advisory committee. Town managers, in contrast to town administrators, have direct hiring powers of department heads. And the relationship between the select board, this is an important note, I think. The relationship between the select board and the town administrator is critical to the healthy functioning of the town. While town administrators tend to serve long terms, or at least longer terms, the constant turnover on the select board can create a challenging environment for the town administrator and really for the governing of the town, in my view. Next slide. The legislative branch in Brookline is town meeting. It is now 255 members. There are 15 elected from now 17 precincts. And in 1915, Brookline became the first town in Massachusetts to adopt a representative town meeting form of government. So in addition to these elected members, there are other members who are allowed to vote at town meeting. They're the members of the select board. And it is members of the general court who live in Brookline, like Tommy Vitolo, Representative Tommy Vitolo. The moderator and town clerk are also entitled to vote, but by tradition typically don't. In fact, I've never seen them vote. Members vote for resolutions, bylaws, amendments to current laws, the annual budget, which funds all town services. It typically meets twice a year. Resolutions off now, and this is interesting in Brookline. This is unique to Brookline, from what I understand, is that resolutions offer guidance and express the will of the majority of town meeting members. And in Brookline, resolutions are treated with the same force as a bylaw, and that is unique. Typically, they're guidance only that help to inform decision making, but not create a mandate for that. The degree of participation, of course, varies by town meeting member, and all members of the community can be heard at town meeting. You don't have to be a town meeting member to be recognized by the moderator, but only elected town meeting members are allowed to vote. There have been occasions when people who do not live in the town have wished to address town meeting. And that requires unanimous agreement from the members of town meeting, the voting members. Even one dissenting voice can prevent a non-resident from addressing town meeting. And that has happened. Next slide. I serve on the advisory committee. This is the finance committee of the town. In 1910, town finance committees were established by state statute. It's advisory to town meeting. It makes recommendations on nearly all warrant articles these days. Some we've chosen not to if we really have no role to play in terms of financial considerations. Importantly, the advisory committee reviews the proposed operating capital budgets for the coming year that are in the financial plan and presents the budget for approval by town meeting. The one authority that we do have, The advisory committee is the only authority that may approve transfers from the town's reserve fund for unforeseen or emergency expenses when town meeting is not in session, and also from the liability insurance fund to cover insurance premiums and insured losses. There are up to 30 members appointed by the moderator. Typically, you're given a 1-year term, a provisional term, and then appointed to a 3-year term. These are staggered terms. And public hearings are held at subcommittee levels within the advisory committee. Primarily, there are times when the full advisory will hold a public hearing. Next slide. Which brings us to the actual warrant, which is published in the combined reports to town meeting. So all the articles submitted for consideration by town meeting are in these combined reports, along with recommendations from the select board, advisory governmental boards, commissions. The articles, including the budget, are debated, votes taken, recorded digitally, and certified by the town clerk. Legend has it that years ago, the combined reports were actually hardbound copies, and that the first day of town meeting, one could literally hear the cracking of the spines of these hardbound books as town meeting members opened them for the first time, which goes back to that point that town meeting members have individual involvement. So you can choose to be your level of involvement in town meeting affairs in the individual. So next slide. So now we're getting to forms of government. So Brookline has no town charter. The town became, Brookline became a town in 1705 before towns had these charters, and the charters define the operation of the government. What we have is that 2-page Town Administrator Act, along with special legislation that, according to Town Administrator Mel Kleckner, whose last day is actually today, serves as a mini charter for Brookline. So the question is, what would Brookline do if we want to change our form of government? Next slide. So typically people think of town versus city, this dichotomy, but between that dichotomy, there are a number of variations. So one thing to think about as you look at the variations that we'll look at on the next slide is what it means to have a participatory government. For example, Brookline's representative, next slide, Brookline's representative form of government has 255 elected town meeting members. Changing to a town council or a city council, should we become a city, would greatly reduce that number to maybe 15 or 20. And then if we became a city with a mayor, which is what I think many people think of when they think of city, they think like Newton has a mayor or Boston has a mayor, then it goes down to 1. And the opportunities for participation then change dramatically from a volunteer level, an advocacy level. So changing our form of government would require a charter commission composed of members of the public elected by the voters. Then following a period of study, about 18 months or so, its recommendations would need to be voted by the registered voters. But it's not always a slam dunk. For instance, the town of Framingham, which was the largest town in Massachusetts, we were the second largest. It put the question to the voters 3 times before the voters voted affirmatively to become a city with a mayor. And in the city of Newton, they had a charter commission to look at changing, for instance, the number of city councilors, to reduce that number, thinking that would make it a more efficient government. But the voters rejected that recommendation. So just having a charter commission doesn't automatically mean that anything will change. So those are some of the variations that we can have, and you can read them. But
Janice, can I ask a really quick question, clarifying question?
Yep.
Just really quickly, the word strong and weak and stuff, how would you characterize Brookline's situation using the word strong and weak? What is strong and weak in our government form?
Oh, good question, Karen. So we have a strong select board and and a relatively weak town administrator. A town manager has much more authority. And that authority comes, for instance, town managers can directly appoint department heads. In Brookline, the town administrator recommends to the select board a department head. I think, and Betsy DeWitt, who's a former select board member, can add to this, but I think that typically the select board will follow the advice of the town administrator in terms of hiring.
And just to be clear, when the Town Administrator Act for Brookline was formed, it was intended that that role become more like a town, like a manager. And over the years, the position's responsibilities have become closer to that of a town manager. The appointments that are recommended by the town administrator have been typically accepted and voted by the select board because of the thoughtful research and the effort that's been put into identifying what those positions should be. I think what I'm trying to say is that if you just look at what the written language says, you don't necessarily have a picture of the way things work.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. However, as a legal issue, the town manager doesn't have that authority. It's in Brookline, we have
The distinction is the difference between the administrator and the manager is with a town manager, the appointments can be made directly by the manager. That's correct.
Yes.
Janice, I have a question which came up because of recent warrant articles that were passed by town meeting, namely the gas ban. At what point does the AG's office no longer have to approve of what it is we pass?
So cities do not have to go through the Attorney General.
So
Towns-
if we
Towns
if
need
we-
to.
if we were a city, we have more freedom to
Yeah,
make our own decisions.
And
about
that's a little bit further on when we
Okay.
start talking about
Maybe-
city and town. Yeah.
we
But
should
you can
move
see
on.
that there are a number of variations. Watertown called itself, has changed from a town to a city, although I think it was a city that still called itself a town. But anyway, it's now officially a city with a strong city manager and a city council.
We only have 10 minutes left, and I'm
Okay.
wondering.
Yep, let's keep going. Yep. So, and we can go through past that. So we can get to the difference between a town and a city. Next slide. Yeah. So enacting legislation, Kathy, which is, I think, the question. So it's a very different process. And I was part of a group of citizens that put together a warrant article to enact gun store zoning in Brookline. What happened in Newton, an application came to open a gun store. There was a lot of opposition from the community to this. The city councilors were able to respond to the application immediately. They did their research. The legal department created an ordinance. That ordinance was voted in by the city councilors. It went into effect and it effectively denied the application. When we did a similar thing in Brookline, now we didn't have an active application. So we had to do it just proactively, assuming that one might eventually come before us. So we did the citizen petition. We talked to town departments to create this zoning. It was brought to town meeting voted affirmatively, and that went to the Attorney General's office, which approved it to become law. And so it's a more arduous process. Yes, it is. Next slide. Yes. So I thought I would show you what has been followed by ZEAB. The numbers were the original numbers of the articles, but they've now changed. The warrant hasn't yet been published, so I have no idea what it is, but I thought it'd be interesting because this is where Mothers Out Front really shines and really has a strong, I think, role to play. So you'll see that 7 of them are home rule petitions. Home rule petitions have to go to the state legislature for approval.
And would we need a home rule petition if we were a city? If we were a city, it would be a
No, yeah,
it would be a non-issue.
I think, I believe that's true. Betsy, correct me if
Yeah.
I'm,
Can I just, yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment. I don't know how to do that. Unfortunately, my screen isn't working.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Can I jump in?
yeah,
Go.
Great, thank you. I'm also for these competitions, and I wanted to say one of the differences between a home rule petition and resolution is that can everybody? I hope everybody can hear me.
It's not
Can everybody
great.
hear me?
Not great, not great.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
you should put it in the chat. It's not, I can't hear you. Not
Put it in
great.
the chat. Good idea.
Can
And I'll
someone
read it out.
clarify how much slowed down the process is by needing the state to get involved? Are we talking months, weeks, years,
Definitely more than weeks.
more than
Yeah.
a few weeks?
yeah, it slows it down probably by months. It depends, because if the home rule petition is not approved,
It
then
could
it
fail.
if it fails, it doesn't go anywhere. Right,
Yeah,
and
I said
that's in case what happened with creating a new zoning bylaw to prohibit new on-site fossil fuel infrastructure. And this is something that Mothers Out Front probably knows a lot about, that this was twice, it was brought to the state for approval. And twice it actually failed. The Attorney General actually did not approve it. But now,
Diana, you had a question?
Yeah, no, not a question. I just suggest one of the attachments to your email with the link is an article that we wrote for League of Women Voters on presentation Tommy Vitolo did about home rule petitions and how they can more likely be successful as compared to not. And I don't want to take time now, but I suggest you read that article and you'll also understand how difficult it is to get a lot of home rule petitions through.
right. So
Diana,
and
that's very helpful. Kelly, can you email that to everyone who was here today? Is that possible at the end?
Yeah, it should have been in your reminder email that you received this morning.
there.
But I'll send it out in a follow-up email.
Thank you,
so
Diana.
I
Representative
think
Tommy
my internet
Vitolo,
connection is a little bit more stable. Can people hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. I just wanted to jump in and comment since I'm a co-petitioner on these home rule petitions. And as you know, that Brookline has had a very successful campaign in promoting these home rule petitions statewide. The first home rule petition we submitted was in 2020 after our original fossil fuel bylaw was disapproved by the Attorney General. So a year later, we submitted a home rule petition. We've been followed by, as of yesterday, 11 other towns and cities, including Somerville and Boston.
Lisa, you're breaking up again.
right, so Representative Vitolo says that to get state approval, legislative approval, it helps for a home rule petition to be unique to the municipality, not a generalized law. Lisa's absolutely right in what she said. It should be, it's right. Yes, okay. And ZEAB, I was going to correct that. So you'll see that it says under 27, authorized participation in the fossil fuel free project. So what makes this year different is that the state is allowing a number of municipalities to pilot this initiative. And Brookline is likely to be one of the municipalities since we have been one of the leaders in this in the state. And Lisa Cunningham has been really really at the head of this effort. And you know, I thank Lisa for all her leadership in this on behalf of the town and hopefully the state as well.
Janice, we have 5 minutes left, and I'm wondering where we are at with this
Okay.
slide.
So this was basically it. The next slide is action to be taken. I want to get back to the actual question of this presentation, which is Brookline, city or town. What does it mean for Mothers Out Front? And I want to just remind people that city and town doesn't mean town what we have now and city with a mayor, that there are options that we can look at, which may in fact be a better fit for Brookline, because we are a community that runs on volunteer effort, and participatory government only really works well when there are opportunities to participate. So.
Thank you, Janice. I have a question for Janice, and it involves what Lisa Cunningham just said. Lisa, I heard in a way the implication of what you said, that by asking for home rule, there was a lot more publicity, and now a lot of other towns are following our lead in Brookline. Janice, is there any worry that if we were a city, the unintended consequence that we would be doing what we want, but there wouldn't be that kind of domino effect throughout the state?
I think Lisa makes a really good point, because if you want to create real change, we can't just do it as a little island. That to create real change takes more than that. And I think what Lisa has done, and the people that she's worked with, has really made this a much broader and more effective issue to do something that can have a broader impact, outside of our own borders. So
yeah,
I think Lisa's absolutely right.
Okay, and Karen, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just have two questions. One is, where would we find like a repository of information about how to look into this if we were interested? Because I'd rather not just generically search the web. Isn't there some source that has compiled relevant analysis of the different forms? And then that's one question. The other question is going back to the demographic information. I'm sorry, I didn't really understand the connection that you're trying to make with that random list of demographic information and
Yeah,
what we're
Karen.
talking about and Mothers Out Front. So if someone could make like the dots come together for me, I'd appreciate that.
Diana, you have
That's a little bit of a stray slide now. It was initially thought that this kind of information, potentially if it's gathered and we can coordinate much later on, that it might be helpful to buttress arguments as time goes on with forms of government. It's a little bit off base now. It was more as we were starting to.
Oh, okay.
Right,
Thank you.
Karen,
Don't worry about it.
I'd like to address your other question.
Okay.
So in my personal experience is that every community has its own personality. And so while there are these sort of options, I think it's really important to fit the option to the personality of the community. And Brookline seems to really value participatory government. And so the more you rigidify it to like a city with a mayor, with a single authority, there are, in my view, fewer opportunities for ordinary people in the town to participate and feel really a part of the town. I grew up in New York City, so it's definitely very different in New York City, where you are very far away from government. But I will tell you, I'm head of an organization that is a Brookline Newton organization. I can call the select board members easily if I have questions. I would never get to the mayor of Newton. I would be stopped lower down. So I think, yeah.
Kelly, can we go back to seeing everybody so that we can facilitate the discussion? Is that okay? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So in my view, I think that we can't just look at forms of government. We also have to measure our own values and personality in the town. So, and in fact, Framingham may not be happy with its choice. I have to learn more, but.
I have heard, I think I can't remember who this was. I think it was Werner Lowy some time ago talked about at a meeting, he stood up and he said something about town meeting in a certain kind of way, holding back more progressive movements because there are so many people, 244 people or more now. Actually, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact number anymore.
255, yeah.
255 that have to be pulled along. And I thought it was an interesting statement. I hadn't thought about it that way because the participatory aspect of our government is really wonderful. But I do wonder now, are there times that it holds us back?
I have a quick question. I'm sorry, anyone else? Lots of questions.
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
go ahead.
Did you want my perspective on that, or?
Go ahead,
Sure.
Kelly.
I'm Kathy. So my view is that this is a democracy. Democracies are slow. They're slower. On the other hand, I think it's through a deliberative process that we actually move a community along, rather than just being given, told what to do. That in order to get buy-in, or, I think that that's with any issue. I see it with the equity issues that we're dealing with in the town, that you need to bring in as many people as possible along to be very effective in a community. And so it's a frustrating form of government. I think Warren is absolutely right. It can be very frustrating. It is a little slower, but I think in the long run, it's maybe a strong form of government. So
Go
I
ahead.
had a quick question about participation, our extremely low amount of participation in elections. And I was just wondering, I'm sure that it's been considered why Brookline can't formally change our election day to coincide with the other elections that people are participating in anyway. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm just curious what it is.
I don't know of any local municipality that holds its local election at the same time as a state or federal election. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. We have changed the date. It used to be held in March, and now they moved it to May, and I'm sure that was because of weather. So, like the Queen moved her birthday, for weather.
Donna, you have a question?
Yeah, a quick question. Are there any opportunities for forums where there are panel discussions presenting pros and cons of town versus city, so the public can also hear, in addition to read, about the differences?
I
Well,
think that's something that's totally appropriate for the League of Women Voters to do.
we've actually started down that process already, trying to get a baseline of what people, first of all, what do people know about Brookline, what form of government? And so there's a lot of people come from other places where they've lived in cities and just assume Brookline is a city and operates the way their former community does. We have the town clerk, former town clerk once said that we turn over our population, 1/3 of our population turns over every year. So that's a lot of mobility in Brookline, and it means a constant education process.
Wow.
I just comment that part of the population question, and it comes up at the census, is how many, quote, I'm going to call them transients. It's not really fair, but lots of students, graduate students, but people who are in the metropolitan area involved in education in one form or another, live in Brookline during the school term, but don't necessarily live here permanently. And at the census, we count them because they're bodies that we have to count. But when it comes to elections, they may be registered to vote someplace else. So it's more complicated than just how many bodies there are.
I would add to that, however, that graduate students are here year round, not just during the school year. That would be undergraduates. There's not that many undergraduates in Brookline given the rental prices. And I do think that people who are renters, consider themselves most commonly residents of Brookline and care about what happens. And it has at times felt like town meeting represents more the longtime homeowners than that large population, and that large population deserves representation as well.
Well, they're certainly deserving. They have to participate first. And what I'm talking about is whether they do or not.
Yeah.
That's a whole different coffee for us to discuss. I think that raises, Kathy, a lot of issues, because then only property taxpayers directly pay the property taxes, which are going up astronomically with every override that's passed. So we have to figure out equity. Rents are also skyrocketing. I mean, we have to figure out a way to make it more equitable for everyone in the town, to be the town that we all really came here to live in, right?
So we are over time. I want to thank both Janice and Diana for putting together such a really thorough presentation and helping us in this discussion. I think we've gotten a good start in it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Nice job, Kathy, facilitating. Thank
Nice
you.
job, everyone. It was a great presentation.
Janice and Diana, yeah, very,
Yeah,
very good.
really excellent.
Well, a food for thought. Thank you, Betsy, for your insight.
Clearly more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I need to learn a lot.
Well, the
Okay.
league is certainly going to take these issues up. So going forward, there will be another whole set of discussions that we will be sponsoring. So it's not over yet by any means.
Good. And
Kelly, I
Sybil's,
wonder,
excuse me,
Kelly,
go
I
ahead.
wonder, Kelly, I wonder if you can save the chat and maybe there are parts of it that need putting into a.
Yeah, follow up. Yeah, I did that.
Yep.
Yes, I have the chat saved in. Okay, let's stop the recording.